Guys, wait, no, you don't understand. He's got some great movies. He's done a lot of really good disaster movies. He knows how to make a good one. I promise. Guys, wait, don't go. No, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy.
This planet has suffered 5 extinctions. This is going to be the 6th.
Are we dead?
No, we are just inside the moon.
That might be the greatest sentence anyone's ever said.
And today we have Moonfall. Before we get into the meat of this video, I just want to say this real quick. They're not by any means an official sponsor of this video or my channel because I'm nowhere near big enough for that kind of business, but I do want to thank Regal Cinemas and Regal Unlimited for basically making this possible for me to review this film as early as I am. I don't know about where you guys all live, but I'm in like Tennessee, a lot of Regal Cinemas over here, and they do have this like basically this more on the books, more like controlled idea of Movie Pass that they do, and it's like a monthly subscription, and I do it. So I do the middle plan, it's like $23 a month, and I get to go see a lot of movies. One might say too many movies, but thankfully, thanks to them, I'm able to do this as frequently as I have been. That's why last year I was able to set my record of most films seen in a year, 50. And I'm able to go to something like this. Because of Unlimited, I was invited to an early access showing of Moonfall. And it's always cool to be invited to like an early access showing of a film, you know? So before getting into my actual opinions on the film, I do want to thank Regal for making it possible for me to be able to actually go to the cinemas, see this early before it even comes out next month, and be able to review it in a timely fashion. And if you want to sponsor me, I'm all game for it. Today we have, as I said, Moonfall, which came out this year of 2022. You might have probably seen a trailer or two for this. I think there's only 2 trailers and some TV spots, but it's a big blockbuster film, apocalypse, end of days type of stuff coming up, as always, by a man who is no stranger to this subject matter at all. We have, and it's a name that you might even know at this point because he's pretty famous for the films that he's done, but you have Roland Emmerich as the director this go around. Basically, and arguably, the father of the disaster film, the apocalypse film. I'll get to more about the filmography in a minute, because that does have very close ties to my opinion of this current film. But side note, it's nice to be able to like get back to, I don't want to say American films, but after reviewing very recently Drive My Car and Belle, I always feel kind of out of my field and out of my depth in those types of reviews. So it's nice to kind of get back to my wheelhouse here of something that I'm very familiar with. I grew up on Roland Emmerich's films. I have a great appreciation for his body of work, and I'm more familiar with kind of that American genre or subgenre, if you will, of film. Getting into who stars in it, so again, a lot of familiar faces you'll see sprinkled throughout the film, but based on trailers in the movie, I can safely say that we have a top 3 for our like top build cast here. All of which you honestly will probably know. First up on the list, we have Patrick Wilson, who, if you don't know him, it's been more recent years, plural years, that he's been put in the spotlight more so. I would argue and say his biggest bit of exposure was from The Conjuring, which I have mixed feelings about that film that I would gladly go into at some point in the future, but I'll give it to him. He acts his ass off in that film, and for that I commend him. You also have Halle Berry, who I think is one of those household names that honestly needs no introduction. Like, what film hasn't she been in? Halle Berry is just one of those names where you hear it, you know it, you see her. You don't know who she is, look her up, but you honestly kind of should by now. And then a very pleasant surprise out of, you would only really know him, and only because I would only really know him, but we have John Bradley. He's getting more roles in American film thanks to the success both of the show and of his own in his roles as Samuel Tarly in Game of Thrones. So he's showing up in more film and media now, and bravo, because one of the biggest perks about this movie, I'll get into in a minute, involves him. So, what to say? Okay, so I'll make one general statement to preface this. then I'll get into the pros and cons. So here's the thing. It's kind of unfortunate because, as I said before, I grew up on Roland Emmerich films. When I mentioned filmography earlier, this man is responsible for bringing us such classics, hit or otherwise, as Independence Day. Fucking Independence Day? You go back further, Deep Impact, but you got Deep Impact, Independence Day. You got the one that I think influenced me the most when I was growing up, The Day After Tomorrow. And then one of the more infamous ones that he did, as I was growing up in high school at that point, 2012. This man does like disaster movie. Now, here's the thing about a Roland Emmerich film. If you go far enough back, especially to Independence Day, you have the threat that, you have the ever-present danger of whatever the big threat is that's gonna wipe out the world, and you have your characters. But there's time being taken, maybe not as much as, a big drama-winning Oscar film or whatever, but there's time being taken to develop your characters, to make the audience care about them, to make them endearing. You incorporate like narrative, plot, logic into it all. So whenever there is action and there are stakes and things are going sideways, there's more at stake and you feel more ingrained in the film. You feel more along for the ride overall, but like we want these characters to survive. I will say that as the years have gone on, especially I kind of noticed it a bit with 2012 and so on as, again, the years went on, I feel like Roland has been focusing too much on the action side of things and has been slowly but surely falling away from his roots of like what it used to be, of the type of film that he used to make. And Moonfall is unfortunately a prime example of that. Pros first, the biggest takeaway I have from this film: John Bradley steals the fucking show, and that should tell you a lot about this film. In a movie where you have Patrick Wilson and Halle Berry as part of your top billed cast, John Bradley is, in my opinion, the best actor in this film, brings the most to the table, gives you a surprising amount of character depth with a little bit of script that he has to work with. I don't mean he has few lines, I mean the quality of the script is lacking, and he's able to still elevate that. This man, in showing me that he can still bring this character alive in this film, shows me what a talented man that he is. So props there. John was the best part of this film, honestly. I thought the comedy would be schlocky, and some lines are pretty freaking cheesy, but there were still some lines that he has that makes me chuckle, like out loud in the movie. To its credit, the movie has a good premise. If you watch the first trailer and stop at the first trailer, then I was very, very much like hooked on it. I was like, oh shit, Roland Emmerich is making a new apocalypse film where the moon is gonna hit us and there's something sinister or maybe alien going on, maybe, who fucking knows, and all this is gonna be action. I know these actors, and like that's all you needed to tell me. Leave it with an air of mystery. But I will say the premise of like what's going on, like, oh, the moon's gonna hit us, like that's cool. That's pretty cool to me. Some sequences in the film are genuinely like they're visually interesting. There's a lot of sequences, and the trailers kind of show them, but there's some sequences that involve like fluctuation of gravity. One of my favorite parts about this film, and it starts a little bit in the beginning and goes full tilt as the film continues. Again, no spoilers because the trailers pretty much show it. For context, there's a game that I love from a series I love. The series is Borderlands, but the game I super love that elevated the game series for me was Borderlands 2 for a numerous amount of reasons. Long story short, in this game of Borderlands 2, you are on an alien planet called Pandora. In the second game, you kind of move to a new location on the planet, and there is a the planet's nearby moon, and there is a enormous satellite station that is like watching over you and monitoring you, and it's in orbit around that moon. And wherever you go, and it depends what part of the map you're on, you have this visual, really just cool looking shot of like scale and sci-fi brilliance where you see the moon in the sky, but then you see the satellite also hovering there in the light, and sometimes it's closer, sometimes it's farther, but it's just this really cool like visual. I like that a lot. To this movie's credit, there's some cool shots where, since the moon is out of orbit and it's coming closer to us, there's some neat shots where the moon is super, like either super close or like really super close, and that's pretty cool. I like that. It added this it made me think of a game that I loved, and I was like, yeah, you know what? They're doing it pretty well. That looks cool in the movie too. It translates. And this one, I don't know if you would call this a pro necessarily, but this movie has produced some of my favorite lines in a film. Not because they're good lines, mind you, but because they are absolutely hilarious to me and worthy of being a meme. And again, I don't mean hilarious in a really good way, like, oh, haha, that line was genuinely well written and funny. I mean, there are some lines where I'm like, what did that guy just say? Like, there's a couple really good ones, and then a few good ones throughout the film that I'm going to be quoting for a while with some of my fellow film aficionado friends. But that is a pro, technically, so props, Moonfall. But of course, as the moon does in this film, we eventually have to have the oncoming crash that is what does not work in this film, which unfortunately more does not work in this film than what does work. This film is I didn't think it was very good. I was very let down by it. As I said before, I think Roland is getting worse at writing and fleshing out his characters. The only person I cared about was John Bradley's character, and that was only like, a baseline care, like, oh, he's nice, he's endearing. Everybody else, like even our top billed cast, they were there, but that's it. They were just there. They weren't, it's so weird to explain, they weren't phoning it in, but at the same time, like they weren't like really acting, it felt like. It still felt like they were just, this was a made-for-TV film, and they were there, and it's like, oh cool, look who it is. But I wasn't like, oh my god, what a heart-wrenching performance, like, ugh. And I'm sure it's not their fault, but it's just unfortunate. Every other side character, whether it's military buddies, ex-wives, ex-husbands, children, family, it's really hard to give a shit about anyone because everybody is so painfully one note. Everybody has a character quality about them, or maybe like a skill, or like a single, like, oh, well, this person did this, so they'll be good at this, or this person works here, so they'll have access to this. Like, everybody who exists in the rest of the cast just kind of exists to serve a purpose for the narrative. That's it. Like, I could not have cared less what happened to these people, and the stakes for the drama that involved them was just, a lot of it seemed silly and unavoidable. It was just, it's just mediocre. In these types of movies, you can't logic too hard, because if you think too hard, you'll ruin your immersion, you'll pull yourself out of the film, and you're like, oh yeah, none of this would work. And this film, like, as I'm watching it, I'm like, oh my god, I gotta turn off my brain. Like, this film at some points tries to kind of be like a little Interstellar, like some like smart science to solve the day and some really cool sci-fi shenanigans. It falls flat in my opinion. There's some good ideas that are tossed around here and there, and things are kind of neat happen. And the idea, the reveal of what is going on is like, it's not a bad reveal in the sense that the plot twist for old isn't a bad twist. Like, okay, cool concept, Moonfall, cool thing to happen, I buy the premise, but your execution was just, it was mediocre. It was just like it was like watching a okay episode of Black Mirror, I guess, maybe. It's hard to find an equivalent here. The action is mediocre and honestly borderline nonsensical. There's a couple moments in the film, like I told you, there are a bunch of really cool sequences. A couple moments where like the action is like, oh, okay, this is all right. The biggest thing for me was that I saw the first trailer, right? The first trailer was a good trailer. It kind of alluded to like a mystery, but didn't show you much of anything. It was perfect. Then they released the second trailer for Moonfall, which shows you what happens in the movie. All the major beats of the trailer are showing all the major, like, oh, our characters are gonna start here, go here, end up here, and here's a snippet of all the action sequences. It is one of the worst fucking trailers I've ever seen for a film, in that it just shows you the film. If you've watched the trailer, you can pretty much guess what's gonna happen. Like, no cap, no lie here. That's it. And super on the nose, to use a good psalm, like, I see a bad moon rising, and then put that in the trailer, and it's like, oh my god, like, what? I feel like Roland is embracing it, like, kind of like what Michael Bay does. Like, Michael Bay is like, I know what I'm about, bitch, and then he just goes off and makes whatever the hell he wants to make. You know what? Kudos to you, but Michael Bay has always been, like, questionable quality. Roland used to have a lot more quality to his work, and now to watch it slowly but surely kind of just, like, decline into a baseline of like, well, Americans will probably still go buy tickets and watch it, and maybe the international audience as well too. Like, it's just, There's better action films out there. They have a lot more effort, and better action films to come. They're gonna have a lot more effort. But I digress. I don't want to tear into this movie all night here. We're already getting a little bit too long on the review. I want to kind of wrap it back up. All in all, I think Moonfall is not worth your time in theaters. I have no desire to see it again. I would watch it again if I got drunk with some friends to have a fun time. I didn't hate the movie. It's not a terrible film. It's just, out of all the disaster films, especially out of all the disaster films that Roland Emmerich has made, there are so many better options out there, so many better ones you can watch. You don't really need to necessarily waste your time with this. If you're curious, you can stream it. But there are some pros to it. Like I said, John Bradley's great. The movie has a good premise. There are some sequences that are visually appealing. There are some decent lines in the film that made me laugh that are like, oh, that's nice. And production value, aside from some really weird shots where you can tell that there's obviously a green screen, which Roland keeps doing. Again, how much money does it take? I know it doesn't take a lot. You can make a shot look good. But aside from some shots where there's like obvious green screen behind your characters, the production value is pretty decent. Like outfits, costuming, the lab, spaceship, sci-fi, hootenanny, holler, whatever. It all looks decent. It's good. It looks good. But for all those reasons aside, I would have to give Moonfall a low, and I mean a super, super extra, with a cherry on top, low, 3 out of 5. Like, it's definitely below average, but it's not, I can't give it a 2. I cannot give it a 2 in good faith, because 2 I reserve for, like, bad. Moonfall isn't, like, rotten or bad. Granted, at the time that I'm recording this, there are no reviews. I got early access, so I have not seen a single review for this film. So, we'll see how it goes. I kind of have an idea how it's gonna go, but my opinion is this. Moonfall is not a terrible film. I also don't think it's a particularly good film. I think there are better films of this director's to watch out there that are more exciting, more endearing, more intense, that are just well directed, better done. Hell, Godzilla 1998 is a better film than this. Go watch that. And that's like one of the worst Godzilla films, but it's still a great film that I personally enjoy. Again, fuck you, Rotten Tomatoes. I love Godzilla 98. King of Monsters is still the best, but I digress. So yeah, that's all I have to say about it. Moonfall, again, kind of fallen victim to the early year films. I'm hoping that by the time that we break into February and then eventually March, we'll see more of a change in that pattern and we'll get more quality, especially with films like Death on the Nile, hopefully Uncharted, and eventually The Batman. It exists. I'm very curious to see if it makes its money back, but I have my doubts. So yeah, that's all I got to say about Moonfall. As always, thank you so much for watching my review. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about the movie if you've seen it already, or if this is going to prevent you from seeing it. I hope I saved you some time, but that's all I got to say. Low 3 out of 5, not really worth your time, but it's not terrible. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for the next episode of whatever movie I review next. And goodbye, travelers.